Welcome to the South by East podcast.
Welcome to the South by East podcast, where we discuss culture, the scriptures, and everything in between, and how they impact Southeast Topeka with your co-hosts, Jonathan Sublett and Braille Watson.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the South by East podcast, season 2, Generations, where we talk about the scripture, the culture, and everything in between. And this season, we are talking about education. And today we have a really special guest on. John, why don't you tell them who we have coming through?
We have Dr. Correll coming through. He is the superintendent of Coffeyville's public schools and also the 2022 Kansas Superintendent of the Year.
Yes, sir.
I'm excited about this because I do have a relationship with Craig. We were part of the inaugural class of Kansas Future Fellows together. And if you're new to the podcast, that was this opportunity where the government of Kansas and the Center for Public Partnerships and Research picked 11 people from around the state to come together to develop long-term solutions for families in Kansas over the next 50 to 75 to 100 years. And so I got to meet him then during that experience and be a part of that. And so it was this great opportunity. And so I knew that once we took this route, that I wanted to bring him into it. And man, he's doing some fantastic work, and I've heard part of it. So I'm interested today to just ask deeper questions, to go in, because, man, it's heavy as the head that wears the crown.
Man, always.
And being a superintendent right now, man, it has to be difficult because you have such a diverse population. You have to care for everyone, not just one sector. You have to keep your school board happy. You have to keep your parents happy. You have to keep your administrators happy, your teachers happy, and worry about the student population and all the outcomes and all the state assessments and everything that goes with that, man.
It's a lot. It's a lot to juggle.
And you're the face of the district. You're the lead advocate for the district. Yeah. And so a lot of people have a lot riding on you, and you're making a lot of decisions. Now, you're not alone. You have a team, but you lead the team. Yeah. Right? And we know that leaders, man, when it comes, it's like the quarterback. When a team wins, the quarterback gets way more credit than he should. And when they lose, he gets way more to blame than they should. So I'm interested to hop into this conversation with Dr. Correll and see what that looks and feels like in the world he exists in right now. Welcome to the intersection, South by East fam. Hey, we're here today and we're having a conversation with Dr. Craig Correll, Superintendent of Coffeyville Public Schools and the 2022 Kansas Superintendent of the Year. Welcome to the intersection, Craig.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Now, what y'all guys don't know, here's what you don't know. Craig is a fantastic musician and a music lover, like our co-host Braille over here. And so, just as we get started, Craig, what was your first concert, and what was your latest concert?
My first concert was actually a night ranger playing at Pittsburgh State University, and a small band called Donnie and the Rock opened up for him, and that was when I was about 15 years old. So that's been almost 40 years ago. Funny thing is, Donnie and the Rock, the lead singer, lead guitar player for Donnie and the Rock is Donnie Miller, who's from Coffeyville, who later went to Nashville, was a big recording star. He's in the Kansas Rock Hall of Fame, and he's recently, in the last few years, moved back to Coffeyville. So I've now gotten to know Donnie as a friend after him being my first concert I went to. So very small world. You never know how fate's going to turn up.
Oh man, for real. So, can we hear it here first that Donnie is going to be the new Jack Black of Coffeyville schools and do a new school of rock for you? Is that breaking news?
That would be breaking news if that were true. Definitely. My last concert was Ian Moore, who's a great blues guitar player out of Austin, Texas, and he came up and played a gig 2 weekends ago down in Tulsa with some local Tulsa bands, and there's a really great music scene happening in Tulsa right now.
I saw pictures of you down there. I have a love for Tulsa. That's where I went to college. And
Uh-huh.
so, yeah, and then Austin, definitely have a love for Austin, live music capital of the world. South by
Yes, it is.
Southwest just
Yep.
happened, and so one day I'm gonna get the church to write it into my job description that I get to go to South by Southwest every
That's
year, kind
it's a
of
good
do.
idea.
And so, yeah. Well, man, let's jump in. We've been diving deep into education this season in South by East. And we got the view from Melissa Roker as the director of the Kansas Children's Cabinet. And then we went with a futurist with Jake Dunnigan. And then last episode, we had Frank Henderson, who is he is the chairman for a local school board here, president for a local school board, and also the president of just the National School Board Association.
Hmm.
And so now we want to we're starting to get more local, more just closer to the student as we go. And so now we're bringing you in. And your district has been recognized for some of the largest gains in enrollment in post-secondary education among high school graduates. What are one or two innovations that you brought to the table that help make that happen?
Really just working on that relationship with our local community college. We're really fortunate to have a community college here in Coffeyville. Their tech campus is actually across the street from our high school. Their main campus is about a half mile away. So having a good connection with the college, most things I talk about is really going to center around building relationships. And you have to have relationships at my level, the president of the college, and then people see that, and that really trickles down. So I'm huge on relationships. I know I don't have all the best ideas in the world. It's who I surround myself with, and we've done a lot of that. We created a new position at that time. I'm entitled the academic advisor, and she works with students on their individual plans of study, and then also works with the college. So really making sure that the students understand where their skill sets are, what their desires are, and then what they want to do beyond high school.
Yeah, man, I, Craig and I were part of the inaugural class of Cancer Future Fellows, and so I got to hear more of that. And that those relationships and different things that you say, and I think there's a key part of that, man, that you left out, just being modest. When we were talking, you still walk to work, right?
Yes, until just this last year, I sold that house and got a new house. But yeah, for the last 14 years here in Coffeyville, my house was across the street from the board office and walked to work every day.
Yeah, man. And one of the things that reminds me of, one of my buddies, I'm a part of the CCDA, Christian Community Development Association, and one of my buddies dropped a quote from another CCDA guy, and he said this. It's from Shane Claiborne, and he said, "Being in proximity makes a difference. Relationships make issues real and complicated and personal. Relationships move us from ideology to compassion. We can't love our neighbors if we don't know them. And once we are proximate, love requires us to take action to stand up for life in tangible ways." And that's from Rethinking Life and Embracing the Sacredness of Every Person. And man, when I heard that you said that, yeah, I moved across the street from that, and I so often, Craig, in this work, I've just seen people to say, "Well, I can't live locally because then people would know where I live." And you know what? I think you operate differently when people do know where you live and they do have access to you. And I think even the feedback loop that you operate on is a shorter feedback loop, and you need to make changes happen, because if change don't happen, right, they knocking on your door. And so, man, I just applaud what you're doing, and that you began all this and saying the magic sauce is relationships. So that warms my heart. Now, we know many districts in Kansas are wanting to increase access to high quality early childhood education. What would you recommend as a starting point for districts?
Our story really started in 2007. There was a flood in Coffeyville, and it wiped out a good portion of the town. And several groups came together after the flood to talk about how do we rebuild, what do we rebuild, and one of those topics that kept coming up began as just a need for daycare, and parents needed a daycare so they could go to work. So when I got involved in that, I took it to the next level and said, yeah, you need daycare, and I understand that working families have to have daycare, but if we're doing that, let's make sure that's a high quality early learning environment. And so as we got started on this, when I took the job, we had an old elementary school that we had exited, and Head Start was using a couple of classrooms in that. So I'll never forget the day I interviewed. I asked if we could go see that building. And so we had a special education room on one side and some Head Start rooms on the other. And we walked into the special ed side, and I asked the superintendent if I could see the Head Start rooms. And he said, yes, but we'll have to go around this door and come out and come back in a different door. And I said, but doesn't the district still own the building? And he said, yeah, but it's Head Start. They have their half, we have ours. There was literally a door between our organizations. And so the first thing I did was get to know Head Start and talk to them and say, how can we work together? Because obviously, when you share the expertise, you bring in so much more wealth of knowledge. And there's also really a financial savings when you can come together and partner. So we did that. One of the first things we did was get together and work on some grants. We were one of the first 3 demonstration learning communities in Kansas. We applied for a grant, and that really grew. That gave us 2 more preschools. And then as we moved this along, we saw more and more success. So I'll stop there. There's probably more I'll talk about here, but that's really the first thing was getting to know the people in the community, the organizations in the community that could help us and we could help them.
There you go again, stirring up trouble. So first, you moved across the street from the administration office. Then you go in and you start opening doors that have been closed.
Yes.
Do you think, literally and metaphorically, that's what's stopping some of our districts from progressing, is the doors that they've put between them and possible community partners?
100%. That's intentional at times, and it's unintentional at times. I know a lot of districts and their Head Starts were much like Coffeyville, and they didn't want to really touch each other with a 10-foot pole. There was just a lot of distance between them. I think they feel like they're in competition, when honestly, we're all here for the same goal. We all want to make sure that we teach kids to the best of our ability, and then we graduate them and they're ready for the real world. And with our early learning center, what really we're looking at is Coffeyville has a long history of generational poverty. And so it's how do we impact that poverty on 2 prongs at one time. And the first prong is, as an educator, my background is I know if they have a high quality experience at the preschool level, they're 30% more likely to graduate from high school. They're much less likely to be in special education classes, much less likely to be arrested, incarcerated. Our community college, the involvement and the relationship I had with the college came into play when we expanded the center. We needed to raise $2.1 million. We had a local donor who said, I'll give half that if you can raise the rest. The Community College Foundation was the first one to say, we have $100,000 we're going to throw in on that. So that was huge. But the next thing out of the college president's mouth was, we also want to provide a scholarship to any parent of any student attending the Early Learning Center. So now you're truly impacting poverty on a 2-generation level.
Multi-generational work. And now, where were you at before you became the superintendent of Coffeyville?
I was Labette County, which is just the county next door.
Yeah. Do you think the fact that you came in from the outside and had this fresh start aided you in maybe opening some doors that have been shut?
I think that's a great question. I've always felt it's a great opportunity. When you're new in a new district, you don't have skin in the game. And so it's really easy to call out what you see is wrong, what you see you can make improvements on. So I 100% agree that you need to use that to your advantage when you're new in any position.
And you know what, like, I love the perspective that you had on that. So often we hear people talk about what they don't have and the disadvantages, and sometimes, like, being new and the outsider can be something that's seen as a disadvantage, and you flipped it because of your perspective and said, I can give us a new start with partnerships. I can tear down barriers that's been keeping us from progressing. I have fresh eyes to see what needs to change. And so you went in totally with what we say we should be doing this work with, right? From a value-based work rather than a deficit-based vision for how we enter into neighborhoods.
Yes, and one philosophy I have is really looking, with positive intent, not seeing the negative first, seeing the positive intent.
Yeah, this is good. This is good. Now, you mentioned something in there. I think it goes with this, like, Outcomes for the young scholars at Dr. Jerry Ham Early Learning Center are above the statewide average and continue to show growth over time. What is one thing you would attribute to that success, and can that be replicated in other school districts?
It most definitely can be replicated. We've had several districts come and tour our center over the last 6, 7 years, and we've seen this replicated in other places. And one thing I've worked with Melissa Rooker on a lot is really talking to other school districts and telling them this isn't a one size fits all model. You need to kind of look at what we've done in Coffeyville. You need to look at what the top centers have done in Wichita. There's great examples out there, and you've got to pick and choose what works for your community. And that isn't your decision alone to make. That's when you bring that team of community leaders in to say, okay, what do we already have? What resources exist here? Where can we come together and partner to create this? You've got to have somebody with the drive and the overall vision, but then you bring in everybody else to help build that.
Oh man. So okay. I agree. Like you have to when you go see something that doesn't necessarily just plug in, doesn't just fit. And then you have to have that person driving. And so I love saying I want to go get a vision for this, and then I want to be able to contextualize it to fit. And so that is so key in making that happen. And so what is the bare minimum though for people to say, I want to come see what Coffeyville is doing in the early learning center? What is the bare minimum you would tell them to get together as they even prepare for that opportunity?
I would say reach out to their other community leaders who have maybe a shared idea, and maybe a business owner who just needs to make sure there's daycare spots available for his employees. It can start with that. You don't have to have the exact same shared mission here necessarily. It all works together. And in Coffeyville, if you can do it in Coffeyville, I believe you can do it anywhere. We have one of the most diverse populations in Southeast Kansas. We've had generational poverty, a great history of that. Our parents have some of the lowest education levels of the other areas across the state that have been in the studies. Yet we've had the most significant gains over all the other preschools that are in some of these studies. So if you can do it here, you really can do it anywhere.
Man, I love that. Coffeyville is like Broadway, right? If you can make it here, then you can make it.
That's right.
Anywhere.
You're in New York, baby.
New York.
So, man, you spoke about that $1 million donation to help you get started. That shows a tremendous buy-in from the community that surrounds you. How have you gone about to get such great buy-in from the secular business for-profit community and just other area community partners as you've done this work in Coffeyville?
I think it's about letting them see your excitement and your passion and your vision, and then making sure that you're there to listen to them also. You've got to be an active listener when it comes to pitching your idea. You want to pitch the idea, but you need to listen to everybody and just continually building on those relationships.
The results that you've seen don't come overnight. So how did you keep them engaged when you hey, you knew that you were going in the right direction as you started to implement these things, but the numbers that some of the other people want to see were not happening overnight. So how do you engage that business person and that community partner and let them know, hey, continue to trust me, just give me some more time. We're on the right track.
Some of that's having them come into the center themselves and see the center firsthand. We love having visitors come in and walk through our classrooms, walk through what we're doing, and give them all the information that we have as well. I think part of that is also being very involved, not just locally, but statewide. So my local community members see me involved in early childhood adventures across the state. And so I'm not just learning from what's happening in Coffeyville. I get to go steal ideas from other places across the state. If I go help a school district, I take something away from that myself because there's always something more to learn out there.
Man, you've been talking about relocation, redistributing the power and choice and giving buy-in. You've been talking about just tearing down doors, reconciling relationships. You've been talking about listening to community. You've been talking about empowering people, getting them in proximity. You starting to sound like a community developer more than you sound like a superintendent.
I think it all goes together, though. It really does. I tell people all the time when I sign off on the radio, I say we're not just Coffeyville Public Schools, we're Coffeyville's public schools, and I think it's a small difference, but it's huge in the meaning behind that.
Hey, that right there that'll go. That'll hunt. That dog will hunt.
Yeah.
We're not just Coffeyville Public Schools. We're Coffeyville's public schools. And I like one of the things that we say here is there's a difference between saying your neighborhood and our community. Mm-hmm. It's a small deal, but it's when now that I'm involved with it's ours, right? And it's that power of ownership. It changes the game because now I'm concerned about the legacy and the future and different things that's involved with it. And that's what it seems like. Like I see you post. You're the only superintendent I've ever seen do some of the things you do. Like every day you post the lunch and you post about how great the lunch is in your schools, right? And that shows something. But then like just because I know you personally, of just seeing your love for other things and you being willing to share that piece and not be so guarded, and just that personal piece makes you a real person. And it's like, again, it just shows your heart once again to be in proximity, to be approachable, to be accessible, and to say, yeah, I'm a part of this community. Like, so I don't have to hide a big portion of my life to do what I'm called to do and the way that I'm called to do it. And so that just means a lot. And then I have some friends down in Tulsa. Speaking of Tulsa, I have some friends that are doing work in North Tulsa. In the area, they're working specifically in the area where the Tulsa race riots happened at. And they were doing work and they still partner with the local elementary school there. But in 2015, they recognized that Tulsa Public Schools as a whole district for the city of Tulsa only produced 22 college-ready African-American graduating males, or males that were ready for college, right? And so the college readiness is determined by a 21 on ACT or higher. That's how they determine whether they were college ready or not. So for the whole district, they only produced 22 college ready African American males out of the whole district. So they started a private secondary school saying we're still going to plug in with this local elementary that we've been working with. Now we're going to start this private secondary school to try and offer another solution. Because I know from working in there, just going to school there in college, there's one school in the area, Booker T, that's really looked, and it's like the lottery getting into that school. If you don't get into that school, it seems like all hope is lost. So much so that the University of Tulsa, from the middle school in the area, they had a program called the Gilcrease program, where if you graduated high school and you went to that middle school, they would give you free tuition to the private University of Tulsa. And then they would pay you to go back and tutor at that middle school that you went to. That solution may work for some of starting a whole free private secondary school. But the Oklahoma even has some laws that make it more feasible to do that, because they make it to where you can donate to that private school and get tax write-offs and all kind of stuff. But how would you approach that from a public school standpoint where we say, hey, we don't have to pull out, but we can lean in and still see the results that we want to see?
Well, I'll go back to the story when I first came to Coffeyville. When I analyzed our assessment scores, first thing I noticed that really jumped out at me was only 8% of my African American 8th grade male students were proficient in math the year before I came. And my jaw dropped open. I thought 92% are not proficient. I mean, that is just unforgivable. So I did a lot of research. I came across Glenn Singleton with Courageous Conversations About Race, got to know Glenn, brought Glenn in, worked with Glenn for several years here in Coffeyville, bringing his team in to work with our teachers. And, like most schools that have a diverse population, our teaching staff is not nearly as diverse as our student staff. And so that wasn't always easy. That wasn't always an easy conversation for these teachers to hear. And so much of it, there's no silver bullet here, but what there is awareness. And so much of that just goes back to being aware of the data, aware of the situations, aware of what we are, to understand how we can do better when it comes to all of our students of color. And we also know that when you raise the tide, all ships rise. And what's good for one is really good for everyone. We just have to dig in. And it did take a lot of work, a lot of time, but after several years, we actually saw our test scores of our African American students exceed our white scores in white student scores at some grade levels across the district. So that's when we knew, hey, we're getting this, but the work's never done. And that's really what Glenn teaches you so much is never expect closure on this issue, and keep working and keep plugging away at that. So that's one. Another one we have, I'm working with Dr. Watson, the Commissioner of Education, next year. And he has a grant that we're going to work on identifying some of our students at the high school who very likely will not be able to afford college, but we feel would make an excellent teacher to be able to come back and teach. And we're going to work with them to be in teacher prep classes their junior and senior years in high school, and then have their tuition paid for at our local community college and then at a teacher ed college.
Craig, I don't think I've ever heard that before. TEA just took over HISD. I don't know if you're aware of that. They just announced they're taking over HISD. Largest, I think it's like the third largest school district in the country. Largest school district in Texas. My background is chemical engineering, so I have to be good in math and science. But I was always seen as the unicorn. Brother, you just told me that black kids can do math.
Yes, they can.
And there's so many that need to hear that.
And I think going back to something you said earlier that I did when I first came here, I wasn't afraid of the data. It wasn't my data. I didn't have skin in the game. So what I did, I showed that data. I didn't hide behind the data. I showed the data on the screens at board meetings. I went out to community meetings. I went out to one of our black churches in town and showed the data. And the respect I had was phenomenal that this new white guy came in and showed us some numbers that don't look good. But that's where it starts. It's that honesty, and it's talking from the heart.
I have seen people try to get the scores of African American students to a respectable level so that they don't get dinged on certain ratings. I've never heard them doing the work to where it exceeds. And that's tremendous. For you, for you just to not say, I'm gonna just do this to meet standard and to make it to where I don't get in trouble. I'm not gonna hide the data. I'm not gonna try to fix the data. I'm not gonna lower the standard and do a false celebration and think I got everybody fooled. But we're gonna lean in to these hard conversations and we're gonna work until it's right. Not necessarily saying it's not right until African American student achievement exceeds another group. That's not what I'm talking about. But we all, just being real, we know, hey, if you're on the test scores, they have the different other subcategories, and they show that if your ethnic populations are below on certain deals, you get dinged a certain amount, and so you got to be within a certain range to not do that. And to hear this work that you're doing, man, I'm just telling you, it is. I know you're in Coffeyville, but you're always in my town. You're always in Topeka, in the capital. And there's a reason for that, brother. And I think hearing this story today is going to give some people hope. Because I'm just going to tell you, my community is ready to totally pull out. Because we've been told our kids can't learn, they can't behave. they're only slated for certain deals. The average kid in my neighborhood right now, African American kid, Craig, is going to make, right now, slated to make a household income of $19,000 at the age of 35. The average Hispanic kid is slated to make between $22,000 and $26,000 as a household income at the age of 35. Our gas bills just tripled this year.
Mm-hmm.
With that kind of situation, we just found out recently that our school district won't be doing summer feeding, and we live in a food desert. And so to hear this work, to hear the multi-generational work that you're doing, that you're saying, man, we're trying to provide for the parents. Like, that's the struggle we have here, man. So I'm loving that, because so often people like to play with the cuddly kids. They don't want to go into the middle schools. They don't want to deal with the high schools.
I taught middle schools. Maybe that's part of it. I taught middle school. I survived it. And if I ever went back to teach, it'd be middle school. I love that age group.
They don't
want a special type.
Yeah, they don't want to go into middle schools. They don't want to go into the high schools.
Mm-hmm.
When you say the thing that would help that kid most is helping their parent, they turn a deaf ear to you. Like, to say, man, there's some trauma here. We got to address this. There's some racial issues. We got to have these conversations. We're not saying that you're a bad person because there might be a blind spot. We're not saying that. We're just going to have conversations to bring awareness.
Yes.
So that you can help that kid engage, and we can. And I love how you, like, man, you have this way, and this really humble way of just saying, this is what's in it for you. Like you talked about, like, if we do this, our whole community is going to change. This is Coffeyville schools. We're Coffeyville's schools.
Right.
For you in this, and I think that's a missing piece in how people are able to communicate, and part of your secret sauce, brother, and how you've been able to bring people on board. And so, man, I just want to thank you. And if you, just as we get ready to end this time, man, what if there's a school leader, a PTO leader, even just a parent involved and help get people on the team, what would you tell them to start and help?
Boy, I would just say, listen to your community. Get out there, attend your school's site council meetings, listen to those parents, listen to your teachers. Just make sure you're really hearing the voices in your community, and speak from the heart. I think that's just so important. And I think that the older I get, the more I understand that I don't need to prepare a speech. I need to be prepared, but then I need to speak from the heart. And I think that's what matters so much. I think it goes back to what you saw about, or what you spoke about my Facebook page. The older I get, I think people need to see that I'm not just a superintendent of schools. I also play in a band. I also go to concerts and do these things. We're people too. And I think that helps them associate with me much better than me just always being in a suit and tie.
Man, that's great. And one day we're gonna have to. I see that you also like to grill and smoke meat, and so one day we're gonna have to get together and throw some on the pit together.
There you go. I've seen yours too.
And we're gonna have to enjoy that. And so, and I'm, both of us, me and Bro, are both music lovers also, and so, man, I appreciate your time today. You have stirred my heart, seriously. And I think some people are this is going to give some people the juice, man, to say, here's a key one. I'm not being negative when I look at the problem. But we have to start there if we're going to tackle the problem.
Mm-hmm. I think you have to have the positive intent. You can't look at everything like it's a problem. You have to look at it and find out what's good here, and then how can we make that better.
Yeah, and that's what Jake Dunnigan spoke to us about knowing where you're at and knowing where you're going, and then what you're going to do once you get to where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what you're saying, and it's like, I guess the better way to state it is, what's the opportunity that sits in front of us?
Mm-hmm.
And so that maybe that with the positive outlook is saying, what's the opportunity that sits in front of us to write a story that's gonna get the podcaster to tear up when we tell it.
Right. You know, I told you I came from Labette County right next door. Labette County is probably 99% white. And I grew up there. I taught there. I was a principal there and came to Coffeyville. And I tell people all the time, I feel like my career really started when I came to Coffeyville. Coming to Coffeyville opened up my eyes to so much more in the world. And it was the best move I've ever made. I've been here 15 years and I've loved every second of it.
Man, that's good stuff. That is good stuff. And we so appreciate you for joining us in the intersection. We're gonna get out of here, and then Brell and I are going to do a debrief with our audience of this conversation. And so we appreciate you being on. Thank you, Dr. Craig Correll, for your time in the intersection today.
Yep. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Boy, man, John, as Dr. Correll was speaking, I saw you get a little choked up, man. What struck you so heavily?
There's some dirty words in our world right now, man. When you start talking, if you start talking NDI stuff, it's like a dirty phrase.
Diversity, equity, inclusion.
But man, when you start talking about the difference between equity and equality, it gets really dirty really quick, and people start assuming a lot of things. I have existed, I feel like, in a world where people are steady asking, what's good enough? And when he started speaking about how when he got there, 8% of African Americans were on level in math. Man, you know how many narratives have to be written for you to get to 8% of a population, of a certain group in your population to be at that level, and then for him to say, it was hard. I brought somebody in. I didn't act like I knew. I didn't try to lead it. I didn't act like I knew all the answers. I brought somebody in. We learned together. We all got exposed together. We had to lean in. He talked about his background from Labette County and how he didn't grow up in that kind of diversity, and so he didn't have it. And it's like he was humble enough to recognize that he didn't have it, that he needed to learn. He brought somebody in. They did the hard work, had the hard decisions, made the changes. And here's the deal. They didn't say they could play Superman. They didn't say they can fix all their problems, and they took on Project Kids and stuff like that. They said, we simply wanted to get greater exposure to what the factors were that may be limiting the progress of our African American community, and we're going to continue working at it, not until we stop getting deemed on some assessment, but now that they're overachieving. Bro, I ain't never heard that.
No.
Hey, me and you both have been a part of the population that said, see, we're not doing that bad, because look at Brell and Jonathan. And we've been like, hey, fam, we cannot be the test case.
Bro, when I was in high school, I actually sat in a class. I won't say which class. I was a freshman in high school. I went to school at Topeka West. And as I was sitting there talking with some of my fellow classmates, there was an event coming up where we did something alongside Highland Park. I've always lived in East Topeka, in between the Highland Park and the Topeka High School districts as far as how the lines are drawn. Okay. And so most of my friends that I grew up with, I went to Highland Park North, and then I went to Scott Elementary, the magnet school. And so most of my friends went to Highland Park High School and Topeka High. And so I heard my classmates talking bad about Highland Park openly, in front of the teacher everywhere. And when I confronted them openly in front of the teacher everywhere, I was told, Braille, you're not like them. It's not about you. Those kids over there, though, you can fill in the blank. And to hear what really hit me about what Dr. Correll was saying, it was amazing that they've been able to do what they've done in the Coffeyville School District. But the thing that got me was, it should have never been like that. And we can't stay stuck on that, but I think we have to sit with that reality of things are the way they are for a reason, and they don't have to be that way. And when we look at opportunities to hear the perspectives, to hear the positions of people who are in places who are having their progress inhibited, and we say it's not that important, or we say it's not that we could actually make a difference, or we say it's not worth the resources, it's not worth the time, it's not worth the effort, it's not worth listening to those students. Those students are just in this place, and the most that we can get them is our leftovers, our hand-me-downs, and our handouts. We are denying the reality that it shouldn't be this way, and it doesn't have to stay that way. And Dr. Correll proved that, and you have resources around you that are accessible to you, and we're not using it. We're not leveraging those opportunities.
Bro, when I first moved to Hi-Crest and we started this work, we brought in an organization that's doing work in another city. And we were wanting them to bring us under her umbrella to do some work. When they said, man, you're going to have to start your own school. And we kept saying, man, we want to work with our public schools. We don't want to start something different. And they were like, we just don't know if it's going to happen, man. Like, it's going to turn around. And we're like, man, we just believe it can. We believe it can be different. And we believe our school districts can achieve. And I said, like, man, if we start this other thing, what happens to everybody that can't get in?
Yeah.
What happens to everyone that can't get in? And I got to be concerned not just for the people that can get in to this one opportunity. I got to be concerned for the whole community.
Yep.
And, man, he's proven that if it's happening in Coffeyville, guess what? It can happen right here in Hi-Crest.
Happen right here.
I spoke with a teacher who retired from Ross Elementary. I just had coffee with her, ended up having some family relation to her. And she told me the story. Like, no. Like, it was different. And this is the trend I saw, right? And this is what led us to this place. And she said, it breaks a lot of our hearts. And I'm saying, like, I kept asking, like, what are the first steps? Because I'm hoping that some people view this with us and the conversation starts of saying, we're going to demand more. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to buy the false narratives. Mm-hmm. We're not going to listen to that. We're going to demand more, and we're going to lean in. We're going to look at it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
It's not about finding the problems. It's about looking at the opportunity for a new story. Mm-hmm. And that's what we try to do with everything. And that's why we coined the phrase, the New South. That's why we've been saying we're looking at it as an opportunity. And to write a new narrative. And I believe our schools are the same way. I continue to hear just great things about, I think he's going to be on, new principal. Mr. Gardner at Ross, and just the great work that he's doing. And I just believe it. I look at the partnerships in the community, but the way he looked at the partnerships. So I shouldn't have been surprised that Dr. Correll took that approach when it came to his African-American population because of the approach that he took when it came to Head Start. Mm-hmm. See, because race was playing a barrier, and when he said, "Well, I got here and we took down the door between us and Head Start. This is a natural progression to take down this next door." And I feel like so often, man, we put up false doors, and instead of looking at an opportunity for us to partner together and gather resources and really get the snowball rolling, we steady fight for territory. I see so often in this work, Braille, where people fight over hurting people.
Yeah.
They fight over who can help certain groups of hurting people, rather than saying, how can we work together to help the people that we love the most who are hurting?
Right.
And I just think, man, like this episode, man, hit me in a different way. Like the last, I got choked up on some of the stuff last time, man. But this episode hit me in a different way, and we need more people speaking this kind of hope into the system, with real tangible results. With when people, hey, when you and your mama both graduate, come on now.
Yeah, come on. And people got to see it, man. Like it made me mad, and I don't want to leave us on a negative tone, but I don't usually go that direction. So I'm gonna feel what I'm feeling right now. And like it made me mad, but it should motivate us. Because I think the thing that hit me the hardest was that I was like, man, have I really seen my neighborhood as what it could be? Have I really looked out and said, no, it doesn't have to be this way, and the work that we're doing can bring about a change, man. That hope is what I think a lot of people really need, and that lack of hope is what I think stops a lot of people from having actual empathy for people.
Man, I feel like I had some of the advantages of Dr. Correll of coming into Hi-Crest as the outsider.
Oh yeah, I was seeing the parallels there when y'all were talking. Like
it's like, man, I stepped in saying like, this is what we can do. This is what, and everybody's like, no, fam, that ain't happening, or no, you can't do that. And I'm like, man, we can do this. Why not?
Yeah, why not?
We just need the right partners. We need to get on board. We can make this happen. Mm-hmm. And I believe, like, looking at Coffeyville shows that kind of deal, and we can actually change the narrative. And we've been saying that from the beginning. We can change the narrative. This could be the new South. Our communities can change, and it can snowball out of here where we get rid of intensive care in at-risk neighborhoods in the city of Topeka. Mm-hmm. And we just roll it out, and we start getting people. But we got to look at ourselves differently. Mm. The rebranding of Topeka can't just stop downtown.
Right.
Man, we gotta look at,
or in Nodo.
Yeah, we gotta look at that and say, how do we do that? How do we totally buy in? What kind of partnerships are needed? And notice, like, man, he didn't go start his own early childhood deal. He partnered in like that. The school, the early childhood center, came out of that partnership. Mm-hmm. If you're watching this and you got some means, come talk to us. Don't just start. Like, come talk to us. That's who are in proximity, who are here, who are doing this work. Man, there's some tremendous opportunities. We talk about it all the time, and
and you're not talking to us to find out our way, so you can do our way. Talk to us with the perspective of learning what's already being done and how you can partner, and we'll be listening with the same ears of how we can partner. It's not just talk to us because we need to lead it. It's talk to us because we're in proximity. And we're already partnering with people here. We just had the Bridge Builders Resource Fair. And we had over 15 vendors, more. I think some signed up at the last minute. 15 plus vendors here meeting with youth and adults from the community. And there were incredible partnerships being made all around the city. And it wasn't just our stuff. It was things that were already happening that we were able to join resources and forces on to be able to impact students in our community.
The greatest thing we said happened out of it, like, it was great to see the students and their parents get connected to all those resources. Yep. That's what we did it for. But the greatest thing that happened is because of how we started off, it was all these agencies that don't normally sit at the table together, sitting at the table together, eating
Talking.
pizza together, that starting to have conversations. And by the end of the night, we had organizations that looked like they did the same thing, recognized nuances in what they did, and start to talk about how they could partner to better serve the people who might need the services they offered within the different nuances that each other offered, which they didn't even recognize until being together that night and having to be around each other.
Come on.
And,
The Shawnee County Public Library did a study that showed that Topeka has over 40 different market sectors. That means those are the different ways in which people gain their information and things of that nature. So it's like if you hit something in a newspaper, you're not hitting everyone. If you hit it just on the news, on a certain news channel, you're not hitting everyone. That's why everyone always thinks there's nothing to do. One of Topeka's biggest problems is its disconnectedness, is the fact that it's disconnected. And the relationships, the proximity, the connection that Dr. Correll talked about is not only important for education, but it's important for our city overall.
But bro, we gotta get people that want to be here. I think that's gonna be a key with our schools. I keep saying that.
Yeah.
I'll put my kids back in public schools when our administrators want to put their kids there and choose to be here. I'll put my kids back in when they believe enough in the education that they're delivering that they're willing to put their kids in. Until then, I'm not putting my kids back in Topeka Public Schools. I'm not. Because
if you won't eat the food, I won't eat at your table.
That's what I'm saying. Bro, if you won't eat your own food, I'm not sitting doing at the table. And so we got to get people that are not looking at their next step. Like he said at the end, he said, my career didn't really start until I got to Coffeyville. We got to get people who are not looking for their next job, but looking at like to enjoy and build a legacy in this job, in this town, in this city, who are buying houses in here and who are staying here locally, who are in proximity, who are not afraid of people knowing where they live at, and that they can walk past their house and their kids are rubbing elbows with my kids in school.
Yeah. It's not what I can get, it's what I can build.
Yeah.
Man, so we appreciate you joining us today as we debrief today on South by East, man. And in 2 weeks, we'll be back with you.
Peace out. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for tuning into the South by East podcast, where we meet you at the intersection of culture and community. For more information on resources shared, check the show notes, and we'll see you at the next intersection. We out.